I think it was in the $58 billion range of rectification work now, like that's getting done per year in Australia. I don't know if it started or they're trying to get it started, a class action up here in southeast Queensland against a volume builder. I think it started with one home that wasn't even 12 months old. I think they had a leaking issue, and then when they come in and cut some plasterboard, they found that inside the walls was completely full of mold. And then the more they investigated, it turned out like basically 80% of this house inside the external walls was moldy. And it actually got to a point where they've condemned the house and they're saying that it should be demolished.
All building biology is the health of any building structure and how it affects the health of the occupants. And I got a job during my study doing energy efficiency against the building code compliance assessments. And I stayed there. That was a great job. Met a lot of really great people through that work. And through that process, though, I sort of came to understand that sometimes what gets built is not what has been designed or what has been assessed by us as energy efficiency assessors. And, you know, my whole motivation for going into this career was to get it right from the start. And I started to get a bit frustrated by that. So I started some study towards building advanced diploma in building biology. I'll be over 12 months ago now. I'm doing it whilst I'm working and whilst I'm, looking after my family. So I'm doing it part-time. I've done just about to finish my second subject. The first two subjects that I have completed are all around mold and mold testing and remediation and post-remediation verification. I was talking to a builder this morning and he said, I went to one and I asked questions and the person delivering it couldn't even answer my question. Not very likely to access that information. Firstly, because they're not technically minded, they are good with their hands. They're not going to go and read the standards or the building codes because they're too busy on site. They're usually snowed under with work and they're too busy. And as you say, there's a fear of things that are too technical or it's not my problem or it's too scary and I don't understand it. So I'm just going to keep doing it the way I've always done it. Another thing happened recently. You can't see or smell most mold. And it's a bit of a frightening notion. So what the mold testing technician will do is go into a house with a pump and they'll go in with some tapes. And it's about sampling the air in the home and it's about sampling surfaces. I saw a post where this family pulled up a floorboard because they had a gap in their floorboards and they pulled up the floorboard to try and fix this one floorboard. And underneath the flooring, the entire place was covered in black mold. So when you have moisture damage inside any home, it only takes 48 hours for mold to start to grow. The curtains grow mold and then every time you open up the curtains, the mold spores dissipate into the air and you can't see them. They're invisible. But once that happens, they're airborne and you breathe them into your system.
I think it was in the $58 billion range of rectification work now, like that's getting done per year in Australia. I don't know if it started or they're trying to get it started, a class action up here in southeast Queensland against a volume builder. I think it started with one home that wasn't even 12 months old. I think they had a leaking issue, and then when they come in and cut some plasterboard, they found that inside the walls was completely full of mold. And then the more they investigated, it turned out like basically 80% of this house inside the external walls was moldy. And it actually got to a point where they've condemned the house and they're saying that it should be demolished.
So under the National Construction Code, if you are in climate zones 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8, you need to use a vapor permeable membrane. And one of my biggest worries with the introduction of this vapor permeability issue in the colder states with the membranes is that somebody's going to pick up the wrong membrane off the shelf because they don't understand the difference between a class 1 and a class 4 membrane. And they're going to whack the wrong membrane on a timber frame and the building could potentially go moldy within a few years and they're going to be held liable for something that they didn't even understand in the first place.
I know that is some projects that I've built over the last 15 to 18 years where they got really wet and we weren't aware of all this stuff and we probably sheeted them too early.
Mm.
And I think this also comes back to why builders need to push back on their or pay money to use good quality subcontractors. Because our flooring guys for the last 15 years will not lay flooring if the moisture content is over 16. But so many people are just slapping them up. The roof goes on, the windows go in, it's all wrapped up, plasterboards in, see you later. And no one knows any better.
Well, that could have been the issue with this house that you're talking about as well, the volume builder. It could have been wet timber frames that were insulated and plasterboarded over before they were dry. So the timber framing code says that timber moisture content should be below 14%. So you can get, I reckon one of the best insurance policies you can have is just getting a cheap pin moisture meter from Bunnings and test your frames before you insulate and clad and just make sure they're under, 14, 15% moisture content.
And I think, like I'm not sure about Adelaide, but like here in Southeast Queensland, and we've started getting some early rain now and it's only late October. We're in for another wet season. But like during the wet season, our frames can sit out in the open and get absolutely saturated for 2 or 3 months, especially when you're doing a large home, before you start to wrap it up. And um, look, that's all good and well if it gets time to dry. And yeah, like I said, to a point where now we moisture check everything before the next layer goes on. I was never taught that.
Mm.
I was never aware of that. Nobody ever told me that. I just started hearing bits and pieces about it here, there, and everywhere. The person that actually pointed it out to me the most was our timber flooring company.
Yep.
And all the wall framing and everything. So leading up to plastering, like we might do 60 to 80 checks around the building, check the wall framing, check the roof trusses, check the floor system. And yeah, we will delay our plasterer if the moisture readings in our timber is higher than what the Australian standard says. We've always sort of taken, I guess, water and how jobs get managed during construction seriously, like covering materials up and trying to keep things dry and those sorts of things. But it's honestly, it's only been probably the last 4 to 5 years that we first started taking more notice of our slabs. And then in the last 3 years, moisture testing. And
Yep.
like our standard in our building business now is that slabs don't get covered up unless they're lower than, I think, 16% moisture in them.
Mhm.
You only have to get the wrong client. And if you might build the home, might be sweet, all gets finished, and it possibly might not even be the client you built for. But that client might sell their home in 2 years' time. And the person that purchases that home might notice a little bit of mold somewhere, or something might happen that leads to an insurance claim or something. They will come back and get you because as a builder, it's your responsibility to make sure that at whatever point in time you build something, it is built to the National Construction Code. I think as builders and tradies, we definitely need to take more responsibility around what we deliver our clients.
Right.
If it didn't, they just chase the builder. I'm hearing from a lot of insurance companies that if they send an assessor out to now, the first thing they do is assess whether it would have met code when the house was built.